So as a little something to fill the gaps between my larger projects, I've decided to resurrect BlueKunai's Backlog bash. The first go I had at this was a year-long project that I compiled into a 4.5-hour behemoth that I dropped near the end of the year in 2023. Good god, where have the last 3 years of my life gone? This time around I'm going to try rejigging it into a more split-up series to offer something a little more compact, but also making it so I'm not leaving this channel in complete radio silence until inspiration strikes again. Maybe as a bi-monthly sort of deal, or at least when I feel like I've played through enough new titles to have enough to talk about. Just a little something to double as semi-regular content for you all at home and a drive to get me to work through my backlog some more, Sisyphean a task as it may be. Hopefully you lot enjoy it, and possibly even find some titles that interest you enough to check out for yourself. The VR space is one facet of gaming that I've always had interest in, but never had enough investment nor the space to get into it myself. Thankfully I have a good friend of mine who is all in on the VR train, and I've since been able to play about a dozen VR titles at his place. Just to name a few, Lone Echo is an incredibly atmospheric technical marvel, Moss is downright charming, and Half-Life Alyx absolutely lives up to the hype. It is so good, guys. That no VR mod doesn't come close to capturing the experience. Absolutely play this in VR if you're able to. My most recent outing in the VR space was a puzzle game by the name of The Room VR, A Dark Matter. While it didn't involve Tommy Wiseau awkwardly asking me about my sex life, it did offer a pretty compelling experience, essentially in the form of a digital escape room. It's the fifth in a series of games that had otherwise released on mobile, which I haven't played, but I might have to in the future if they're anything like this one. Set in early 1900s London, you play as a detective who takes on a case investigating the disappearance of someone, following their trail by going to various locations and piecing together a way forward by way of some eldritch otherworld. I don't have any prior experience with the series, so I'm going to assume the sort of thing has been there from the start. The Room's puzzles use a point-and-click adventure game sort of approach, where you explore pieces of the environment to pick out various objects, and try to figure out the way to proceed by revealing more secrets as you go. You're given a magical eyepiece that reveals some hidden details in the world, from hint glyphs to hidden compartments on objects. The puzzle's made for some great brain teasers while rarely feeling too esoteric in its direction. My favourites of the bunch would probably be the Cathedral and the Witch's House, both visually feeling particularly lived in and immersive, with the puzzles making full use of exploration, sending you back and forth all over the place with plenty of hints to stuff coming up later that always stick in the back of your mind. The Witch's Brew was nice and a bit of a memory and pattern recognition conundrum, and the parts in the Cathedral that have you shrinking down to go inside different mechanisms was great for the sense of scale alone. That ball puzzle and the pipe organ felt a bit unintuitive, but that was probably the biggest snag. Not really much more I can say about it without just describing puzzles, but this would serve as a great entry point for VR. Exploration is point and teleport based, puzzles aren't too difficult, and it can comfortably be played either by standing or sitting. In hindsight, with how my back was after playing it for 2 hours straight, I'm wishing I did play it while sitting. So the genre of, quote, simulation games has had quite an interesting arc. It started off with a very sincere approach to menial work and operational procedure with stuff like Flight Simulator, Forklift Simulator, Railway Simulator, Euro Truck Simulator, that sort of thing. Full-price games with anywhere from hundreds to thousands of dollars worth of add-ons, tailor-made for the kind of player base that is small but incredibly dedicated, like retired dads or people with the brand of autism that know all the inner workings of a Japanese bullet train. Then you had that era during the 2010s where people pointed at these things and said, "Pah, can you believe there are losers that actually play shit like this?" Which in turn ushered in a wave of ironic simulator games. Tongue-in-cheek, but a lot of the time barely functional streamer bait like Surgeon Simulator and Goat Simulator. But then somewhere along the line, games that simulated menial jobs but with a bit more broader market appeal and more going on in the world started to take off, with the likes of House Flipper, Hard Space Shipbreaker, and Viscera Cleanup Detail. The last of which being very important since it very much seems to be the biggest inspiration for Powerwash Simulator. Powerwash Simulator I remember seeing in passing because it was a trending game among a lot of VTubers when it was still in early access. My initial thoughts being, that's a strange premise to build a game with, followed immediately by, hang on, I get plenty of gratification from mowing the lawn, and I've worked a job involving water blasting people's gutters, walkways, and decks that was super satisfying to see all that grime get washed away. That sounds like it could be right up my alley. And 150 hours later, after finishing every single single map and DLC in the game as they came out? Yeah, that would seem to be the case. Powerwash Simulator wasn't a deep game by any means, certainly mechanically a lot simpler than Viscera Cleanup detail before it, but it also didn't have any machines with a chance of dispensing entrails, or opportunities for friends to grief you by tracking bloody footprints in your workspace while your back is turned, so it kinda balances out. This fast became one of my go-to unwinding games. The simple goal of a level to spray until it was spotless for upwards of a couple of hours, while I listened to a few albums, a podcast, or one of my comfort multi-hour YouTube videos. Once Powerwash Simulator 1 released its final free DLC pack in mid-2025, they also announced that they had a sequel on the way in a few months. This did end up raising a few eyebrows as to what a sequel could actually bring to the table rather than just perpetually releasing more DLC packs forever, but I was keen to find out regardless since I was already all in. Powerwash Simulator 2 naturally is a continuation of the first game. While the story isn't overly important, you do get sprinklings of some greater events happening in the town of Muckingham. The washer had always been a neutral part of any ongoing conflicts though, just rolling up wherever there was something that required cleaning, just quietly listening to their clients shit-talking others over DMs. Or in the more extreme examples, like how in the Final Fantasy VII DLC they'd be contracted to wash down the guard Scorpion for Heidegger one moment, and then clean up 7th Heaven for Tifa the next. The second game takes place a few months after the end of the original game and now has your power washing services being taken all around the greater county and the surrounding cities. This is brought across great with the map set up in your home bay showing you the locations of each job. In certain maps you can even see structures and locations that you went to in previous games off in the distance, which was neat to see. It definitely gives more of a sense of cohesion than its predecessor while also serving as some nice callbacks. Filling out Harper's cabinet with various statues and newspaper articles from all your exploits made for great little mementos too. The variety of the new stages here is great. Not a single reused stage from the first game to pad out the journey, and there's a ton of ideas here that make the clean satisfying and getting around a lot of fun. Huge structures like the mansions, barn and rock climbing course, big outdoor areas with popping colours to contrast to the grime like the disco and planetarium, and even tiered stages that unlock more at a certain percentage like the kiosk and the temple. Going off the content of the main game alone, I had sunk just over 50 hours into it before I was all done. One thing I've always really liked about these games is that the detail of the models in each stage is the level design. Each individual nook and cranny that needs cleaning is named and labelled, which shows a remarkable attention to detail in each area you go to, whether it's locations in a building, pieces of an art display, or all of the small components of a vehicle. While graphical fidelity has reached a point that so many games cram countless details into models and environments to the point of absurdity that most people wouldn't even notice, these games get you to examine every last inch of what they've made. It really gives you an appreciation for the craft. You'd certainly hope it would at least, because some of these stages can take a long time. What was functionally the final challenge of the first game was a temple of such enormous scale that I had a friend jump in to help me, because it otherwise might have taken me 3 to 4 hours to finish solo, and that's not even an exaggeration. The final stage this time around was thankfully much more manageable, instead cleaning up a structure inside Mount Rushless full of crystals.
Of course.
The grime present in this game definitely looks a lot nicer. Your objectives are still comically coated in filth from top to bottom, while the rest of the world around you is so clean it makes the city in Mirror's Edge look like downtown New York. But the details in the filth look much finer with more variety relative to each setting. Cleaning sections is also a lot less picky about your completion criteria. The first game had a bad habit of cleaning areas either auto-completing while still having a good square meter of filth left, or being so specific that you had to hunt down the last speck tucked away in a crevice to clear it. This time around it's a lot more balanced to make completing sections feel more rewarding without feeling like you're doing too much or too little. Sometimes you could get some smaller items that could be a bit finicky, but nothing as egregious as we've seen in the past. You're given more in the way of tools this time around. You have the usual purchasable tiers for your standard power washer, outside of the standard coloured heads on offer, with the yellow head being the MVP in all of my playthroughs. You also get a new variable head which has different widths through a cycle. Kinda makes the others feel a bit redundant, honestly. There's also the addition of a circular washer which makes pretty short work of floors. A lot of the time this stuff honestly feels very tailored to people who really want to roleplay the job, because the standard washers get the job done just fine a majority of the time. Soap returns this time around in a much more streamlined form. In the original game, surfaces were distinguished by their types of materials, with some surfaces such as metal having layers of rust on top of the grime. This could be very bothersome or outright impossible to clean with your lower level power washers. You could buy different types of soap for these different surfaces. These not only felt incredibly situational, but they were also very limited as far as quantity goes. Once I got a strong enough power washer, I just stopped using them. The second game gets rid of surface properties altogether, and the soaps are combined into one all-purpose soap that can clean all the surfaces and kills that 0.2% of bacteria that regular soaps can't handle. This stuff is also bottomless. Well, it runs out eventually, but it regenerates over time just to keep you from coating the entire stage in the stuff. I do enjoy that it has a fully animated texture for the running suds now. You get more tools this time around too. On top of stools, ladders, and portable scaffolding, you also get a mount that allows you to scale up and down taller structures on a seat, which is so satisfying compared to placing ladders around the place that also get in the way of portions of the grind. The scaffolding even has ladders on the side of them to make getting up to the top a lot faster, thank God. Completing stages now also gives you a secondary currency on top of regular cash. Cash is all well and good for buying washer upgrades, but in the original game, once you had all the gun upgrades and cosmetics, you didn't really have any other use for cash. Earning extra dosh from the DLC levels meant basically nothing. This time around, cash is for washer upgrades, while power wash points will buy you cosmetics. Stuff for your washers, character, van, and also furniture to decorate your home base. Gonna be honest, I didn't bother with this. While I thought the base was neat for the purpose of world cohesion and having the map and keepsakes around, I have 900 hours in Animal Crossing New Horizons. Decoration side content holds no interest to me at this point. It's nice that this new currency gives you incentive to replay your favourite stages and as a new reward for all the upcoming DLC packs, but it ain't for me. But at the end of the day, that brings up the question. Did this need to be a sequel when updates and DLC for the first game would have sufficed? And at the risk of sounding like a cop-out, I think that depends entirely on how much you like the first game. It's a Left 4 Dead and Left 4 Dead 2 situation where there's not a huge amount of difference between the two, but the second game is just absolutely the better option for all the little additions. Better tool variety, smaller flecks of dirt aren't as obnoxious, and the expanded store and customization is a nice addition if you're the kind of person with investment in such things. Not world-shaking innovations, but the original game being on the market for as long as it has doesn't make this feel like a hashed-out cash-in. Plus Future Lab are independent from Square Enix now. Always happy to see developers make moves on their own without being at the behest of publishers. I for one look forward to seeing what they have in store for future updates and DLC. So there was this cyberpunk bartender visual novel I was quite fond of called Valhalla. While the core gameplay of preparing drinks was pretty straightforward instruction following, it served as a vehicle for the excellent character interactions that were equal parts hilarious and heartbreaking, with some secrets sprinkled in for those paying attention. Taking in the details of the dystopian cyberpunk future they all inhabited, chilling out to some fantastic music, and getting acquainted with the very memorable and likeable cast. Though I had replayed it a few times, that longing for more was still there, not helped by the sequel, Nirvana, effectively being in development limbo for years. This thing has been sitting in my Steam wishlist for longer than Hollow Knight Silksong, and at least that had the decency to come out last year. Where's the Sea of Sorrow DLC, Team Cherry? I'm kidding, you guys take your time. Recently, however, I had this game brought to my attention, Dialogue. With the naming convention, the setting, the art style, the music, the gameplay loop of working a mundane job whilst conversing with your customers, the inspiration was pretty obvious. Hell, you can even see a Valhalla layout on that screen in the back featuring a shrunk-down version of Dorothy, the best character. Dialogue places you in the shoes of Chris, an android repairman getting by in his day-to-day life in a shitty cyberpunk future. Now there's a redundant descriptor. He goes through a rotation of servicing 4 different clients for various issues by opening them up and having a little poke around inside. That's not even me trying to make a dirty joke, the game is pretty explicit about that given how they all react to having work done on them. Frankly, it would feel like a missed opportunity if they didn't. In an age of neo-puritans who talk about titillating fan service and pornography like they're one and the same, I'll give props to the folks still out there doing stuff like this for the love of the game. Go team, who cares about what noisy eunuchs on Twitter think? This maintenance is presented in the form of a match 3 type puzzle game, though rather than your standard grid layouts, this one is presented in a circle, 6 rows that are 4 columns deep. Matching up 3 or more panels of the same colour will merge the pieces and bump them up a tier. Merging another 3 or more of that same upgraded tier will again merge them into an even higher tier. Each challenge presents you with a set of nodes with a different completion criteria, requiring you to get certain colours up to the right tier, fitting them in the right slot as represented on the diagram, and then installing them. It's a nice twist on the genre that I got really into after getting the hang of things. Stringing combos together was immensely satisfying, as was finding ways to install multiple units at once for maximum efficiency. Every now and then the formula is switched up a little by throwing in unstable nodes that will destroy surrounding panels after enough moves are passed, or another where a virus will spread to different blocks and the goal is to clear all the infected ones. These accounted for very little of them though, and I really wish there were more like these to mix things up. While there's no strict time limit nor failure state for any of these, you get in the character's good graces if you're able to finish all of the nodes in under a certain amount of moves or occasionally a time limit. So if you want to unlock each character's respective ending, then you'll have to pull finger and learn to play efficiently, whether you're going for all the achievements or have a best girl in mind. Personally, I went for Liana. She has a lovable personality, an augmented ahoge, and the power of android navel won me over. I'm a simple man. The game isn't too long, taking only about 5 hours from start to end, so while there isn't a huge degree of variety to it, it doesn't outstay its welcome. It was a nice compact package with likeable characters, some great synthwave music, an addictive gameplay loop, a neon cyberpunk setting, and cute android girls. What's not to love? It's not Nirvana, but it was nice in the meantime to fill the Valhalla-shaped hole in my heart. Oh, and did I mention that it's free? It's free. Go check it out. I'm not sure how contentious it is to say, but I've never been a big fan of Pokemon Gen 4. For a lot of reasons that bleed over to me also not liking Heart Gold and Soul Silver that much if I'm being honest. I'm not a big fan of the aesthetic and it's slow as sin. One thing I did always enjoy though was the Sinnoh Underground. Outside of the multiplayer integration and secret bases, you had the mining minigame, digging holes in walls trying to uncover goodies, alternating a pick and hammer to try and strategically unearth as many things as possible without causing the wall to cave in. It was a fun little minigame and a great way to source fossils, evolution stones, and various other items. Now what have I told you, there was a whole game out there based on that concept. That would be Gemporium. You play as a mole named Mole. Like Knoll, but with an M. His grand mole bequeathed him a gem shop with an attached mine as she buggers off to do various retiree stuff, quietly leaving out that a lot of her best gear wasn't left for you and a huge loan had been taken out that still needs to be paid off. Gee, thanks Gran. Gemporium takes the premise of the Sinnoh Underground mining and integrates it into a job loop, going into the mine to unearth jewels, cleaning them up, selling them off to people, and using your funds to both upgrade your equipment and pay off your debts to the loan shark. It becomes a balancing act. The days are surprisingly short, so you need to strike the balance of how your time is spent. You could do the trifecta of mining gems, cleaning them, and then selling them off once the store is open. Or you could spend an entire day digging and cleaning so you have a larger variety of jewels on hand to create a stockpile to sell off in the future. The loan shark visiting regularly keeps you on your toes. You need to have enough money on hand to send them on their way for each visit, but you can't go neglecting spending money on upgrades either. Those payments gradually get bigger each visit, and if you don't have the upper hand that can net you better rewards, you're gonna fall behind. Gotta spend money to make money. The mining side of things is a lot more forgiving than the collapsing caves of the Sinnoh Underground. You pick away at an area and it will beat you out once you've uncovered everything. Digging spots can still collapse on you, but only the ones with the support beams. And really you have to go out of your way to have those come crashing down on you. I only had it happen to me once and that was doing it on purpose to get an achievement. Instead of the imminent collapsing tunnels, the challenge involved in digging is extracting the gems themselves. If you recklessly smash at them too hard, you'll crack the jewels. They can still be sold, but they fetch less money. This encourages you to carefully work around them, utilizing both the hammer for larger strikes and the drill for cleaning out smaller flecks of rock. Once your pack is full, you clean them up by chipping away the excess slag and polishing them up. The chipping part also needs to be handled carefully since the jewels can still be cracked or broken further. Once they're prepared, you can sell them off to a procession of customers. You get a nice payout for giving them what they ask for, but they'll still happily settle with most things for a smaller fee. Upgrades are absolutely necessary for speeding up the mining process. You can get all sorts of buffs like more powerful tools, faster movement, more bag capacity, increasing how many jewels appear in each spot, and many more. Finding the optional artifacts while digging up jewels will also grant you some bonuses for finishing each set, though eventually you get some that break the game in half as far as challenge goes. Once you get the upgrades that extend the length of days and the ability to pay off portions of the loan ahead of time, the game is basically over. This does market itself as a cozy game, so it's not too challenging if you're remotely decent with budgeting. I never once failed to pay my loans on time, so I'm not even sure what happens if you don't. I do wish there was a bit more on the way of collectibles or other things to do though. By the time I paid off my debt, I had long since found each artifact and bought every upgrade. All that was left was achievement cleanup, which just evolved into a boring grind trying to sell a bunch of the same types of gemstones a few times in a row and hitting the 1,000 gems milestone. Would have been neat to tackle a New Game Plus or something, where you start out with a handful of the upgrades but the debt is way more brutal. Gemporium was a good time and a nice compact game I finished in a couple sittings. The gameplay loop is engaging, there's a lot of amusing dialogue and it has a nice sense of progression. If you find yourself yearning for the mines, you can't go wrong with this. Walking simulators often get a bum rap, especially from the kinds of people who insist that games have to challenge the player in some way to be remotely engaging. I'm not one of those people. Games like The Beginner's Guide, The Stanley Parable, What Remains of Edith Finch, arguably even stuff like Flower and Journey, I consider to be exemplary. Beautifully realized worlds that tell engaging stories in a way that only an interactive medium could. That brings us to this game. Scanner Sombre puts us in the shoes of a man recently awoken in a tent in a dark cave. After finding a headset and a scanner sitting on a nearby rock, he's able to scan the surfaces of his surroundings, leaving billions of coloured nodes in his wake to navigate his pitch-black surroundings. With this tool at your disposal, you live to explore a series of caves to find your way to the surface. The way the scanner lights up your surroundings is a visual marvel, like Predator vision by way of Tetris effect. It turns the dark caverns into a technicolor glowworm cave, even including some actual glowworms along the way. The nodes light up based on your proximity, turning red the closer they are to you and turning to blue on a gradient once at a distance. You can coat each area in colour top to bottom if you wish, or even just enough to see where you're going. It'll stick anywhere that you point it. Though it is neat how water will reflect the light from other surfaces but not hold the particles itself. It makes for a neat effect. This is the kind of game I'd recommend playing with headphones for full immersion. Your eyes can only tell you so much with the world presented as abstractly as this, but the sound effects will really pull you into the world. All the different footstep sounds depending on where you tread in the caves, distant sounds of trickling water, windy echoes, and many other noises that really make you feel like you may not be alone down here. There were some noises I heard that had me worrying this was going to turn into The Descent at some point. Thankfully not the case, not from what we could visually see at least. It's still a walking sim at the end of the day, so nothing is actively trying to kill you, but it's an effectively spooky atmosphere all the same, with a few unnerving moments without resorting to jump scares. Throughout your journey you uncover a few upgrades to the scanner which improve your versatility with uncovering the environment, especially useful in some of the larger areas later on. You are drip-fed some story as you go along, with some unnarrated text and details appearing in the environment. Some stuff about a cult hiding away in the depths and a mining operation that went wrong closer to the surface. Nothing overly spectacular all up. This is the kind of thing you'd enjoy most if you just like getting sucked into exploring a game's world for a short burst if you're fine with not that much in the way of gameplay. I tell you though, this would look fantastic on an OLED display or in VR, but playing on a regular screen gets the job done just fine. Now this is one I've been putting off a long time, not even relative to its original release 11 years ago. As I was in the final editing steps of an in-depth look at Tombi 2 back in 2021, I was eyeing up the original Xenoblade Chronicles as the game I would dive into as a way of unwinding once that massive project was finally over, and I absolutely loved it. I basically spent a whole month playing it and finishing every last side quest. I was engrossed in the story, the characters, the beautifully realized world with some of the best sense of scale I'd ever seen in a game. It was such a great time. Then about a year later I sat down to play Xenoblade Chronicles X, and I bounced off of it after about 2 hours. Yeah, I just wasn't in the mood for that big of a commitment at the time. But then 2025 rolled around and the Switch was graced with the Definitive Edition release, bringing with it many quality of life changes, rejigging the interface now that the Wii U gamepad was out of the picture, and adding an additional chapter like Xenoblade Chronicles 1 got with Future Connected. That felt like as good an excuse as any for me to give it another shot, and in the wake of finishing an even bigger video project and really wanting to unwind, this was high on that list for me. X is more of a spin-off of the series, and as such definitely has a different feel to its predecessor in many ways. The linear progression is swapped out for open-world exploration, it leads far more on sci-fi than fantasy, and it has a more Western influence in both its tone and design, right down to the human characters being explicitly American and thus voiced by Americans. While the cast do a decent enough job, none of the battle lines quite hit the same. I was really missing the British voiceovers from the original game, especially Ryan and his smart remarks.
Man, what a bunch of jokers!
In the far-flung future, an interplanetary war between two alien races makes its way to Earth. Due to the unfathomable power on display, a big selection of the population board a ship called the White Whale and flee the planet before it gets destroyed in the crossfire. After narrowly escaping the carnage and their alien pursuers, the ship crash lands on an alien planet called Mira, where the humans settle in a portion of the ship's remains, which they dub New LA. While trying to settle and adapt to this new hostile world they must call home, the humans living in New LA established a group called Blade, building life after the destruction of Earth. Among their many priorities, they're trying to find a vessel called the Lifehold, a storage pod housing much of what remains of humanity in stasis. But they're on the clock as the Lifehold's battery is gradually dwindling by the day. Along the way they come into contact with an alien coalition called the Ganglion, one of the factions who are part of the conflict that destroyed the Earth and wish nothing but to purge the humans from this planet. Quite the far cry from the plot of the original game. While it serves as a decent setup, and there was once again a gargantuan effort put into all the character relationships and details of the world at large, I didn't find myself connecting with the story as much this time. Xenoblade Chronicles 1 had so much wonderful twists and turns and great character moments that I was hooked all the way through. I'd still hold it as one of my favourite stories in all of gaming. Didn't quite have the same impact here. The ticking clock of the Lifehold didn't quite have the amount of urgency placed on it that it really needed. The Ganglion were cartoonishly evil, but not really in a fun or compelling way, and I didn't really take to the main cast all that much. The playable character is an avatar this time around, so they're a big blank slate. Elma and Lynn were pretty great, big and little sister archetypes respectively, and functionally being your second and third party members during all the big story beats that matter. Besides them, there are 20 other unlockable party members, but they're all secondary characters at best, sometimes contributing to the main story but mostly being the subject of side quests. Oh, and there's Tatsu, the token Nopon. He's technically part of the main team, but he doesn't actually contribute to the combat and is just the comic relief. A comic relief with two jokes, being a clueless idiot who acts like he's the leader and being referred to like a foodstuff. Both jokes that get run into the ground in the first few hours alone. Oh Tatsu, you're no hero pawn, Ricky. The world of Mirror is a great follow-up to the location seen across Bionis and Mechonis from the first game. Varied biomes, rich with details, and every location makes you feel so small between the vast landscapes and the towering indigens roaming around. Monolith Soft have made an art out of this sort of presentation. It was a knockout on the Wii U and looks even better on the Switch with a 10GB smaller file size. And an evergreen rebuttal to the people who still try to argue that the limitations of the Switch were at fault for modern Pokemon games looking and running like shit. Be real guys, Game Freak couldn't optimize their way out of a wet paper bag, hardware has nothing to do with it. The exploration is just as addictive this time around, travelling far and wide to unlock new waypoints and seeing unreachable areas or insurmountable foes that you'll keep in the back of your mind, knowing you'll be able to come back later and eventually get the best of. As something to do out in the open world, Xenoblade X brings the Frontier Nav, a device that maps out the world with a series of hexagons with different criteria to fill the slots on the map. Stuff like finding treasures, completing side quests, or downing the local tyrants, stronger variants of monsters roaming around. Certain waypoints also allow you to place down data probes, which will reveal the contents of the surrounding hexes and let you collect resources from these spots. It's not just for 100% completion either, as getting higher completion percentages in each area grants you rewards in the form of currency and various other items to assist you in gameplay. The best kind of completion motivation that many other sandbox games could take a cue from. The combat system in Xenoblade X largely carries over from the one seen in the original. You're presented with a set of arts that can be swapped out and used to combat enemies or provide support, operating on a cooldown system similar to how many Western RPGs handled them. You get some bonuses for paying mind to your positioning relative to where the enemy is, but most of the exchanges still largely play out in much the same way regular turn-based RPGs go, with traditional evasion not really being that much of a factor like other real-time combat systems. Just to lay my cards on the table here, I've never been very good with battle systems like this. Hand me a spectacle fighter or an action RPG and I'll adapt before long, because a lot of that comes down to good reflexes and pattern recognition. Timing your blocks, parrying, punishing openings, that's the kind of stuff I'm about. But in settings where the difference between life and death comes down almost entirely to stats and micromanaging your buffs and debuffs, I flounder like a motherfucker. It's not a fault of the genre, that's all me. I'm a simpleton when it comes to most RPGs. In big expansive games like this, I like exploring the worlds, engaging with the characters and plot, and collecting shit. The combat is usually just something I'll tolerate along the way, even in something as brain-dead easy as Pokemon. I've gotten through more than half of the numbered Final Fantasy games, and every time I grind early and grind hard just to reduce the amount of walls I encounter. For both the original and this game, I was wild mass guessing about how a lot of the combat worked. I wasn't doing a great job at optimizing my arts, and I barely understood how the gem forging system in the first game actually worked. I just bought the best gear when I could, grinded if things got a bit hairy, and hoped for the best. And it worked for the most part. For most of the main story, Xenoblade Chronicles X is relatively cruisy. I still died a handful of times, accidentally brushing up with indigens twice my level or underestimating some of the tyrants even a few levels below me, but the plot fights definitely went a lot easier on me. At least until Chapter 9, where I was almost 10 levels above my foes and I still got absolutely creamed my first few attempts. That there was a wake-up call that I had really been coasting by for most of my experience so far. Getting a decent level from doing every possible side quest and buying all the best gear based on their numbers was only getting me so far. I had to account for resistances, pay more attention to my art setup, and actually put some thought into augmenting my gear. Once I actually had a decent art setup and learned how to utilize overdrive, things were a lot smoother for the rest of the journey. Later in the story, you do however gain access to Skells, the unique selling point of the game as featured prominently on the box. It's hard to go wrong with giant mechs, and Skells were pretty great. They're a great asset in combat, allowing you to steamroll low-level indigens faster than you can on foot, plus they're great for getting an edge on some a few levels higher than you as well. Later in my playthrough I got a weapon with an art called Hyper Burst. Holy shit was this thing powerful. I was one-shotting so many foes of equivalent or higher levels to me. If not, I was demolishing a good 70% of their health from one use. Sure, the cooldown took a while, but that much damage for only 50 fuel? Yes please. But after Chapter 12 you also gain access to a Skell called the Ares 90, and once you have this thing, the game is basically over. It can demolish pretty much anything with ease, barring a few super boss tyrants. Godlike. I almost felt bad initiating some of the side quest fights and then just immediately getting into the Ares and demolishing them in a few seconds. Almost. Not only that, but Skells are fantastic for getting around the world, especially when the flight module is introduced. The mission where you're given the ability to fly for the first time, I was just taking in the view after leaving New LA as Don't Worry started playing in the background. building up to that level of freedom after spending hours exploring these places on foot was almost euphoric. I damn near shed a tear. That's a gaming moment that's always going to stick with me. The Xenoblade series has always been lauded for its excellent soundtracks, but X is definitely considered an odd duck among them. Rather than Monolith Soft's usual collaborators, this one was handled by Hiroyuki Sawano, who is usually known for composing for anime. Attack on Titan is probably his most well-known work, which I'm currently watching through for the first time and have been enjoying a lot. I loved Kill la Kill, and that show's soundtrack is a big reason why. Didn't really care for solo leveling that much, but the intro was pretty killer. His work on this game is definitely a lot more divisive though. Rather than the more JRPG fantasy adjacent stuff in Xenoblade 1, the music in this game is once again a bit more Western influenced, with touches of industrial rock, nu metal, and a lot of vocal themes clearly written by someone who doesn't have a full grasp of English, or German for that matter in some cases. It's an acquired taste to say the least. Me personally, I liked it. I'm a big Twewy fan, so I'm used to vocal themes with corny lyrics. I remembered raising an eyebrow hearing Black Tar for the first time, but after hearing it countless times it really stuck with me, like some sort of dark viscous liquid. I was bumping my head right along to it while blowing away indigents with my skull. Much like the single-player MMO comparison suggests, Xenoblade Chronicles X is a very dense game. If you plan on going for just about everything, you're in this for the long haul. Like, even more than the original game. I sunk 164 hours into Xenoblade Chronicles 1, and Xenoblade X still took me over 200 hours to finish all the side quests, max out my classes, max affinity for every party member, and finish the map survey. Well, 99.8% of it at least, because I gave up trying to beat Telethia the Endbringer. And there's still more that I could feasibly do in this game if I really wanted to go all out, like completing all of the item crafting and getting the hundreds of achievements. But I set my goal for what I wanted to reach before putting it down, and I'd advise you do the same unless you have a ridiculous amount of free time to kill. Going for everything could legitimately take you a few months. I had a few weeks off of work with all the PTO I had accrued, and I was playing this for most of it with very long sessions. I couldn't imagine doing this with the hefty Wii U gamepad and its terrible battery life. I really like Xenoblade Chronicles X. Quite a lot. Obviously, or I wouldn't have spent 200 hours on it. It's a wee bit different from Xenoblade Chronicles 1, so your mileage may vary, but if it does manage to hook you, you'll have a very hefty and engrossing journey ahead of you. If this one is often considered the weakest title in the series, then I'm in for a treat when I finally get around to 2 and 3. I certainly remember this being the talk of the town a couple years back, and here I am finally checking it out long after most people stopped caring, as I tend to do. Mouthwashing follows a crew on a delivery freighter travelling through space. As is typical with this sort of setup, things go horribly wrong. The initial POV character has seemingly deliberately crashed the ship into a path of an oncoming hazard, caused serious hull damage, and filling many parts of the ship with an insulation foam to keep them all from death in the vacuum. Supplies are dwindling and the captain is reduced to a bandaged-up lump of pain and suffering, leaving the co-pilot to reluctantly take charge. What follows is a sequence of events told non-linearly, unfolding the events that lead us here and the downward spiral experienced by all the crew. It does a great job recontextualizing small details to make everything come together by the end. Since I'm not doing a full breakdown or analysis of this game, I'm going to refrain from plot spoilers because that's very much the main draw here. Go into this blind if you're able to for the best experience. I will talk about the rest of it though. Mouthwashing is another on the long line of games that visually takes cues from the crunchy PS1 era of, quote, realistic visuals. Oftentimes it does get dismissed as being pure nostalgia bait for that era of gaming, which is absolutely fair, but I always thought this era did lend itself well to horror, particularly with both the limited field of view for lighting and the uncanny and dirty way it made many things look. The atmosphere in this game is very effectively spooky, even if there's not much lurking in the dark to be afraid of, unless you have an irrational fear of horses at least. I mean, I did when I was a kid, so there's precedent to that. The highlight to this very compact journey for me was definitely the nightmare sequences, level layout going completely awry as the POV characters go off their rockers. It allows for many visually creative scenarios which likewise were one of my favourite parts of the Fear games. Mouthwashing isn't overly complex on the gameplay front and only 2 to 3 hours long, so it's a great little entry-level horror game for people who are otherwise turned away by series with more challenging gameplay. If you are more of a gameplay first kind of person, then this may not quite be up your alley. It doesn't have much in the way of challenging puzzles, and there's only a handful of sections that even have anything resembling a failure state, so hopefully the story scratches an itch. Myself, I enjoyed my time with Mouthwashing, a short engrossing horror story that reminded me positively of stuff like Me-Side, Sagebrush, or Iron Lung. I wonder how long until this ends up with a movie adaptation. Actually, please don't. We don't need another 4 months of Anya discourse. The indie sphere in the 2020 so far has seen the birth of two distinct new genres, those being the anomaly hunter game and the incremental game. One being a very effective way of building a horror setting with very limited resources, and the other being a very distilled game loop built on gradually giving the player more power and a constant reward of resources to gain upgrades. While on the surface that kind of thing is hardly new when you have roguelikes such as The Binding of Isaac or bullet heavens like Vampire Survivors, or even stuff like Cookie Clicker and Adventure Capitalist filling that particular bill, you can always go simpler. My first experience with this genre was a little game called Node Buster. It's a very simple shape, using very simple inputs to take out very simple enemies, rewarding you along the way with more upgrades as the numbers go up along with the amount of stuff on screen. I finished the whole thing in one sitting and it was a bare basics dopamine rush. It was after that I learned there was basically a whole subgenre of these things: dig Xeum, keep on mining, and now a game about feeding a black hole. Much like a game about digging a hole, it's exactly as it says on the tin, breaking down surrounding asteroids to keep feeding mass into a black hole, eventually moving up to planets and even stars, building up destructive powers to more effectively break apart everything you can before time runs out so you can keep growing this cosmic monstrosity. Simple but effective. Not really much more to it than that. These sorts of games feel like the kind of thing you'd come across browsing Newgrounds late at night back in the day. Short and simple, but pretty addictive. I think that's where a lot of the appeal lies. The power gains are rewarding as always, with your capabilities going from this to this. Of the incremental games I've played, this one probably has the most going on. Outside of the main game mode, there's also a few other modes you can play after finishing the first run. They're still largely the same, but they have different unlock trees and stipulations in place to change things up a little, and even time how long it took you if you're into that sort of thing. When I was playing through it, I saw they were even advertising an upcoming roguelike mode. I don't know how exactly that would work in an interesting way in this kind of playstyle, but I give mad props to the lads for sticking to it. I do enjoy these incremental games once in a while, but a lot of them really do blend together. If you haven't already burned yourself out on them, or you haven't dabbled in the genre before, I'd say this is a good entry point. Well, that's all she wrote for the time being. I've been wanting to find some outlet for short-form reviews for a while, and I think this is a good middle ground between individual videos and the year-long project I did last time. I might make some exceptions in the future if there's individual games I feel I have enough to talk about that I could go on for 15 minutes or longer. Sorry if this is a letdown for people who are here for my longer form videos. As much as I enjoy doing those, please understand those things take months to make and I need to be in the right creative headspace to lock in for that long. If YouTube was my full-time job, then I'd make that my bread and butter, but as it stands, this is just a hobby I do in my spare time. I have some in mind I'd like to do eventually. That series isn't going anywhere, but I want to do some more bite-sized stuff for a while. I'm sure you understand. Hopefully next time I'll be able to check out some more titles if I don't go picking up any more Xenoblade Chronicles X-sized games, and if I can wrench myself away from my crippling addiction to Tomodachi life for long enough. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Whenever that may be.